This just in from Fox News, Rupert Murdoch is stepping down as chairperson after leading the brand for 43 years. Murdoch, who is 92 years old, is passing the reins to his son Lachlan, who will remain CEO of the company in addition to taking over as chairman. Rupert will stay on as chairman emeritus.
Quote, "Our companies are in robust health, as am I," Murdoch wrote in a note to employees this morning. "Our opportunities far exceed our commercial challenges. We have every reason to be optimistic about the coming years. I certainly am and plan to be here to participate in them. But the battle for the freedom of speech and ultimately the freedom of thought has never been more intense." He added that Lachlan is absolutely committed to the cause. And I agree. I mean, I think Murdoch is right in terms of Fox News being in a pretty good position overall. I think we're starting to see a trend of Americans become more centrist leaning, and they're going to look for outlets that I would argue are center right in terms of politics and culture. And so I think Fox is going to continue to dominate.
Shermichael, you think America's becoming more center-leaning and not more anti-establishment on both ends of it?
Well, I would say anti-establishment is rooted in conservatism. That's what I would argue.
I wouldn't argue that, but regardless, that's not really, I think, what the center of this debate is. Fox News has been not soaring, shall we say, post the absence of Tucker Carlson. It just had to pay out an over $750 million judgment over the Dominion lawsuit, and there is another lawsuit on the same facts that is coming around the pike. Yeah. There are right-wing competitor platforms, Newsmax and others that are nipping at Fox's heels and getting increasing amounts of the market share. That's part of what drove the tension between Tucker Carlson and the Fox News staff that we saw in the Dominion emails and text messages, that there was this real fear that if you went against Trump, if you didn't flatter the more outsider part of the Republican Party, that you would lose market share because there were these competitors that Fox News was sincerely concerned about. But you think that Fox News, all of that being said, is still in a good position? Absolutely,
financially. I mean, one needs to merely look at their financial quarterly reports. I mean, with all due respect to Newsmax, I'm very familiar with Chris Ruddy, the founder of Newsmax. He's a great guy. I think he's built a great platform. But in terms of what it takes financially to really chip away at Fox News, I'm not necessarily sure that Newsmax is there. I would argue, to the point that you've just laid out, our parent company, Nexstar, is in a far better position financially, understanding what it takes to really chip away at a Fox News. I certainly wouldn't point to Newsmax. So yeah, I stand by my point that I think Fox is financially in a good position to continue to be a robust voice on the conservative right.
I think the Newsmax example is exactly right. But there is, I think, an appreciation, as evidenced by this show, that increasing numbers of Americans are not aligned fully with either the Republican or the Democratic Party. That for a very long time, the majority of Americans identify as independent, and that there are increasing numbers of people who are socially more conservative and economically populist. That's the quadrant that Donald Trump really seems to have activated, in which Fox News and led by Tucker Carlson, started to go in that direction. But all Fox News hosts are not Tucker Carlson. People like Sean Hannity are much more establishment and mainstream. And I think the question in the wake of Tucker's departure is whether or not Fox News has the ability to stay the course and still appeal to that audience, or whether alternative media outlets, increasing numbers of people don't get cable, increasing numbers of people get their news on Twitter or on YouTube, watching shows like Glenn Greenwald's and Russell Brand's and Tucker Carlson's on Twitter, that this could be a broader crisis for legacy media. And we've seen the liberal stations flail. Obviously, Fox News has not suffered as much.
Doing well.
Are they?
I mean, they appear to be, based on their ratings and based on advertising dollars spent on most of their shows, particularly their primetime shows. I mean, I think you raise a valid point in terms of linear not having the influence and power that it once did in the previous several decades. But I think digital consumption, while headed in the right direction, from a business perspective, I wouldn't yet be willing to bet all of my cards on digital dominating linear. I just don't see that, at least for another decade. And that's not to say that we're not going in that direction, but
well,
again,
that's all I'm saying.
Purely from a business model perspective, I think Rupert is right in terms of the way he views his company. And again, look at the investments. Look at how well the company's doing on the stock markets right now. I mean, you can follow the dollars and follow traditional investment houses to see where they're putting their money. And clearly, most of them believe Fox is ultimately going to be okay.
Yeah, I don't think the question is whether or not Fox is one of the biggest, most powerful companies in the country, or that it is very competitive among linear media. Mm-hmm. It is. It's doing better than anybody else. I think the question is whether or not things are shifting. And I think there's a lot of evidence that things are shifting, not just for Fox, but for the entire cable media landscape.
Yeah,
I do think it's been a rough year. I don't think that, so I saw some of the coverage of Rupert Murdoch stepping down, saying there was no reason given. Implicitly, he's old and has said in the past that he wants to leave while his mental faculties are still sharp. And I think everyone will accept the explanation. No one is really asking why a 92-year-old is retiring. But I think it's worth noting that having a judgment against your organization of almost $1 billion, I mean, 780 whatever million dollars, is a huge financial setback. Losing your most popular host, firing him over what seemed to be some personal discord as a consequence of the disclosures that came out in the course of the Dominion lawsuit, is a huge hit. Now you have Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson yakking it up in interviews off Fox News about Fox News.
Trump
That's
not
a good look for the
debates
company.
For Fox News.
Exactly.
No, I don't disagree with Fox certainly having a serious level of animosity towards them by a certain segment of the Republican base. But I would push back against that and say, but where are most of those individuals going to go? Sure, they will watch Tucker's videos on X. I watch Tucker's videos on X. I know Tucker, he's a phenomenal guy. I like him a lot personally. But I still do tune on Fox for certain things that I'm not seeing on X or that I'm not seeing on other digital shows. I do go to Fox for a certain level of expertise that some of the other shows just don't have the reach to bring on some of those guests.
Sure.
And I'm willing to say that most Republican, conservative-leaning Americans are doing the same thing. They may not watch as long as they did in the past, but there's still certain shows they're going to tune into, and that still helps bolster Fox's ratings.
Do you anticipate any cultural shifts or programming changes as a consequence of Rupert stepping down and his son Lachlan being the CEO? Or do you think that it's going to stay the course?
That's what's so interesting about this, Bree, because the other siblings are not, as you are well aware, are not as conservative as Lachlan. And so maybe not while the father, Rupert, is still alive, but whenever he transitions, I predict some significant infighting between the siblings in terms of, do we keep Fox? Do we try to sell Fox? Do they agree with the overall direction of the company with their brother? Because from my understanding, they will have an equal ownership share of the company with Lachlan. How do you balance that out over the next 5 years? Those are some serious questions that Lachlan's going to have to deal with. And I think a lot of conservatives, to your point, are going to then, in turn, look at places like a Newsmax, look at a Nexstar, which owns News Nation, Us the Hill, and other digital outlets for information.
Well, if popular HBO show Succession is any indication, the liberal leanings of the siblings don't necessarily mean they're not going to stay the course and follow the money.
Everybody likes money, right?
Direction.
That's true. I'm not mad at them.
Yeah, I remember
what
Roman did. I haven't forgotten. All right, stick around. We'll have more Rising right after this.